Moderating this session for today will be none other than your humble servant, Jim Chick Fomunjong, in my very person, and I work at the West Africa Civil Society Institute as the head of the Knowledge Management and Communication Unit. Once again, you are very much welcome, and we hope to have a very fruitful discussion. The discussions of today are going to be amongst ourselves, but most importantly, we will be having Dr. Solomon Amua of the University of Ghana, and also a seasoned knowledge management specialist within the civil society sector, none other than Christian Elonge, who will be interacting with us. I will introduce them later on in this introductory session. Once again, it is good to recall why we are here, to reflect on feasible ways to address issues or challenges pertaining to leadership transitions within civil society organizations. And of course, we know that effective leadership contributes to the success and growth of any organization. However, some of our organizations struggle to put in place governance systems hinged on effective organizational leadership practices. And this eventually leads to poor organizational management. This can sometimes result to the inefficient management of executive transitions or transitions within the helm of the leadership of our organizations. Hence, it is important to step back, and that is what we are doing now, to reflect on what can be done to address any eventual challenges with regards to leadership transitions in our organizations, or be proactive in thinking through ways to prevent any possible leadership transition challenges within our organizations. This session, of course, will enable us to examine some core issues that enable ineffective governance systems within organizations, hence leading to poor leadership transitions. We will also explore feasible pathways to address governance challenges within our respective organizations. It is important to note that we will do this by basing our understanding on empirical evidence or a study that was conducted by Dr. Solomon Amua, and then that will give us a foundation to explore or discuss these issues. I'm sure many of us have read that insightful report, which Dr. Solomon will be exploring further. Once we get Dr. Solomon to share the insights of these findings, we are going to break out into rooms to discuss specific topical elements that he will raise in his presentation. We are going to have 4 breakout rooms, and each room, once we get into those rooms, each room will be expected, participants per room will be expected to identify a facilitator within that room and also have a note taker within each room. So please prepare yourselves to nominate yourselves and take up these responsibilities so that we can have very fluid discussions within our respective discussion rooms. Once we are done with those discussions that will last for about 28 minutes, we will then come back to the plenary. The note taker per room will present the key takeaways from your discussions so that collectively we can have a coherent understanding on best ways, to understand the issues that are affecting our organizations when it comes to leadership transitions. But most importantly, some of the tips that we can, of course, fall back on to address these leadership transition issues within our organizations. Once we are done with those, we are again going to invite a very eloquent panelist, Christian Elonge, a knowledge management specialist, who in the course of last year conducted a case study to understand organizations that have gone through leadership transition processes across the region, what which are these organizations, what were the processes they used, and what are some of the tips that we can take away from these organizations. That will be the rundown of the program. And of course, before I invite the first guest, permit me to introduce to us Dr. Solomon Kofi Amoah, who is a social scientist, and he has keen interest in all forms of social and economic interactions and their consequences on society. He is a Ghanaian, and he presently teaches sociology in the School of Continuing and Distance Education in the University of Ghana, Legon. It is important, dear colleagues, to know that Solomon is, of course, one of our very notable ambassadors. And by our here, I'm talking about the West Africa Civil Society Institute. He is a 2017 research fellow at WAXI, and he's also a Carnegie Scholar under the University of Ghana Carnegie Next Generation of Academics in Africa project. He is a PhD candidate awaiting his graduation from the Department of Sociology and Anthropology from the University of Cape Coast. He also holds an MPhil in sociology degree from the University of Ghana, Legon, where he had earlier graduated with a first degree in sociology with study of religions. It is important to note that Solomon has over 7 years of research practice and of course teaching practice as well. And he has interacted a lot with several civil society organizations and came up with this study that he will be sharing the findings on. Next discussant for today is also going to be Mr. Christian Elonge, who is currently an independent consultant in knowledge management and e-learning with over 7 years of leadership experience in helping businesses and nonprofits to become learning and sustainable organizations. He is also the executive director of Muna Kaleti, which is actually an organization that helps to promote reading in children. And that has made him to be recognized as one of Africa's top 30 champions in promoting learning or children's literacy. He is equally the chairman of the International Network for the Promotion of Arts of Speech in Africa, an organization called RIPAO. It is important to note that Mr. Christian worked as the Knowledge Management Officer for WAXI, the West Africa Civil Society Institute, and he's also an Ashoka Fellow, where he worked tirelessly with Africa-oriented professionals and international brands on social impact projects that changed positively the narratives in West and Central Africa. Welcome on board, Solomon and Christian. Can we get a hello from you both, please?
Hello, everyone. Here is Christian Elonge, and it's a pleasure being here, engaging and learning from one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. Dr. Solomon, please. Hello, Dr. Solomon. Dr. Solomon was with us. Okay, I'm sure he will be joining us shortly, but just to give us an overview of what the Knowledge Cafe is all about. Yes, this is the maiden session of this very important program, and it is one that we hope to continue organizing periodically. We are actually going to send out a post-session survey just to get your feedback and know, and that will enable us to determine how frequently we should organize these sessions. How did we come about initiating this? Over the years, WAXI has been contributing enormously to produce a lot of knowledge products, a lot of opinion pieces, research reports. We call them op-eds, we call them issue papers, we call them research reports on diverse issues affecting our work as civil society. Many readers have read them and uploaded the content, and some have come back to us to discuss some of the issues that were raised within these reports. As a result, some of them recommended that it is important that we create these spaces to ensure that different stakeholders share their perspectives based on some sound evidence that has been been collated and documented somewhere. And so if you go onto our website, which will be shared in the chat section, you can go to the publication section and you can see all the reports that we have been publishing since our establishment in 2007. Hence, this is just the first. And of course, we are going to have many more of these that will be informed by your responses to the survey that we will be having at the end of this session, so that we can equally act based on informed decisions that, of course, we will be informed by you. And also, it's important to know that if you are interested in contributing to the body of knowledge on the work that you are doing, on the operations of civil society or civic space in general, in your country, across the region, or in your part of the world, do not hesitate to contact us, our research unit in WACSI, using the email research@waxi.org. My colleagues will type it in the chat section. You can just send us an email with the topic and maybe an outline, and we will equally get back to you to discuss how best to document your experiences or your practice in a way that will really be appealing and interesting and convincing to our audience. The key thing to note is that we work primarily with civil society actors. Hence, we ensure that any piece of work that is being documented has something to do with civil society or a lesson that civil society actors can learn from. We, however, accept views from diverse topics, so do not hesitate to share your views with us. At this juncture, we would just like to do a quick poll, and I'm going to invite my colleague Nancy to share a link that we are going to use to just click on the link, respond to it so we know who is here with us in this session. It's going to take us a few minutes, just about 2 or 3 minutes to do that, so we get a sense of who is in the room. We invited civil society actors, we invited colleagues from the academia, we invited our colleagues from the media. We are aware that different kinds of stakeholders are here. So the link has been shared in the chat. Kindly click on it and just choose the category of institution you represent in this meeting. That will really be helping us to know who is in the room. Thank you very much. Dr. Solomon, are you back in the room, please? Yes, colleagues are already indicating that they have already taken the poll. It's a very quick one, less than 2 minutes than I initially said. Yes, Dr. Solomon, we can see you. Good morning, and how are you doing this morning?
Yeah, Jim, I'm great. I trust everyone is good.
Great. Everyone, I am sure, is doing very fine. So at this juncture, we are just going to leave the microphone to you. Can you tell us about the key questions that you went into the field, explored, interacting with several civil society organizations in Ghana to understand what is going on when it comes to our governance or the governance of our institutions, and most importantly, how we manage issues pertaining to leadership transitions within our respective organizations. Doctor, you have the floor, please.
All right, thank you, Jim, and thank you, colleagues. Grateful for the opportunity to share, with this, what I will call this global audience. I'm very grateful. This study we talk about here was actually birthed in 2017 when I started to, explore some leadership concerns that were coming up in civil society organizations, across the region, but particularly using the Ghana case. And it yielded, as we may all be aware, some very interesting outcomes. I am going to share, as we can see here, some of these insights with colleagues. And this is how my presentation looks like for the day. We look at the background, then I go into some theoretical arguments. That will not be much, obviously, because I see a constituency of, practitioners in the room. So much of what I will do will shift to be on the outcomes, some of the important things that were discovered in the study, so that we can have the proper discussion. Then, of course, draw some conclusions, my recommendations, and we can go on with the day's discussion. Thank you once again. Very grateful for today. Actually, civil society organizations and their sustainability issues has actually been important, in the recent past to civil society itself, its actors. And this can be seen in the works of Dakwa et al., Van Dyke, and other researchers who have all tried to appreciate the sustainability of these organizations in the sector. Of course, many of these studies have tended to follow the social problem, and because of that, they have focused mainly on the issue of financial resource mobilization and the financial stability of these organizations, and therefore haven't, as it were, given attention to what we have come to discover as another important aspect of the sustainability of civil society organizations, which is the leadership and, of course, governance. So this study sought to interrogate some of these concerns in the sector. Within the civil society sector, there are a set of standards actually within which is agreed that these are the key indicators of how governance is supposed to be. And this is seen mainly in what is called internal arrangements, self-regulatory mechanisms, which is seen in the clear separation of a clear governance structure in terms of the role that the principal governing body will play. And this is usually clearly separated from other management functions, So these things are agreed upon. And even though we understand that governance is not all about boards, there are activities of boards that are known to protect organizations, against the deleterious effect of executive actions and inactions. And this has been widely documented. Gadosi and Sonnenfeld, even Van Dyke talks about it in his 2018 report. And so Jim,
Yes, we can. Are you there, please?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about my network. I think I thought I wasn't being heard. Okay, so as I was saying, there are actually standards, okay, that are agreed as, you know, being the main indicators, if you like, of governance, you know, systems in our sector, and these have been researched into. There have been several commentary about how these governance systems, you know, are instrumental, how important they are for the sustainability of civil society organizations. But one thing that is clear is that not much has been done over the years to actually look at the effectiveness or otherwise of these governance, you know, systems. And so my study actually sought to examine or explore the extent to which civil society organizations, mainly through their boards, are able to institutionalize effective governance structures and systems, including mainly leadership succession plans, and of course, how effective this has been over the years. So that is what I sought to look at. And theoretically, this is actually brought under the systems argument, where the CSO itself as an organization is taken as a system with parts, and these parts work together as an integrated whole and interdependent to ensure the sustainability or the survival of the entire system. So I consider the board and the management as two key components of the system that we are discussing here. And what the management does, you know, vis-a-vis what the executive, what the executive does and what the board does come together to form what makes the organization sustainable. And so we observed these things using the cross-sectional exploratory research, you know, approach, if you like, which involved a cross-section of civil society practitioners, board members, and experts with interest in the nonprofit sector in Ghana. The collection of the data was done using the instrument of a questionnaire. We administered questionnaire, in-depth key informant interviews were also done of some key staff and executive directors of civil society organizations. There was also a focus group discussion, and then some observation were done. And I'm sure later, if we have to go into a discussion of these methods, it will be good to do that. The study, once again, I want to emphasize, explored. Jim, please, if you can hear me, you can move on. Otherwise, I could equally start the screen sharing from here.
Yes, please.
All right, okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Please, colleagues, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, as I was saying, the study once again explored the institutionalization of governance structures and systems in some selected organizations in Ghana. And it sought mainly to find out the extent to which the CSOs instituted, you know, structures and systems that specify accountability, specify clear governance structure, in terms of the role that the board plays and its separation from management functions, and also looked at the leadership succession plans of the organization as well. Now, these measures I mentioned were assessed along a 5-point Likert scale. And so what happened was that these organizations were asked specific questions regarding these measures. And for example, the extent to which the board and the management make sure that the organization has clear leadership succession plans, and they were supposed to rate it from 1 to 5. And the ratings were quite interesting to follow, as some of you may have realized in the paper. Now, when you take the structures and systems that specify accountability, it was rated below the average. The average should have been 2.5 rating. And if you compare that even to clear leadership succession plans, which now makes us very interested in the issue of leadership transitions and succession plans, it is rated less than 1. And that is quite curious. So while the lack of structures and systems, is clear in the survey results, what is even more curious is, the ratings that the practitioners give to leadership succession. In all forms of organization, I mean, we agree that leadership succession could raise some emotions and considerable fear and all of that. But as to whether this was the reason for the lack of attention to succession planning, the study is not exactly able to say, except that we are here and we can discuss what actually is behind this lack of succession planning. Studies elsewhere have also found that while a great number of non-profit organizations were anticipating, for example, a transition or some leadership change in the next 10 years or in the next couple of years, 5 to 10 years, most of these organizations were not prepared and therefore were ill-equipped for the envisioned transition. Santora and Co. did a study in 2011. They found the same case. Gotthard and Austin talk about that. Benjamin also talks about that. And I want to find out, in our discussions, for example, are there any contextual explanation for that fact? Because we also see that succession planning is not going on, at least the formal type is not happening in our organizations. Are there any contextual explanations for the reason why this is happening so? Then we get into some of the issues. I call something the challenge of putative governance systems. And how do I explain this? Governance systems were found, at least the structures involving the board, basically, which is the primary part of the internal governance of organizations. The boards were constituted in many of the organizations, whether they are small, big, with fat budget or not, they had the systems. And these systems were not necessarily because the boards and their accompanying systems were always constituted true to the real reasons or purposes for which boards serve in some of the organizations. The structures were actually required for many of them. It's a requirement in the registration of non-profit organizations under the Companies Code in Ghana. And to be known as a not-for-profit organization limited by guarantee, as many of you may know, you need to have some of these basic governance structures or show that they are in place. So they have to be constituted. And you can find this in some of the comments that practitioners give. Abedi here, who is not his real name, actually, a 62-year-old founding manager of a CSO, told us during the interviews that for about 4 years after registering the organization with social welfare, it was more or less like a one-person NGO. I was a lone ranger. Every other thing was only on paper. It was in my 5th year that I began to get some recognition and a team to work with. But still, the issues of board hasn't been so important. No. Sincerely, no. So this is the case. And that is the fundamental, the basic constitution of any governance system starts with the existence of a board. And you find that for some of these organizations, I choose this quote because it runs through quite a number of, it summarizes quite a number of the thoughts that were shared during the interviews. And in this next one, he says, in our case, the registration required that we have a board of directors. So we made sure that there was that list, but that is just it. So the board functioning in many of the organizations, the board only existed in theory. It wasn't necessarily operational. I mean, the structures were not operational. But we also found that the theoretical existence, if you like, of these structures, actually help the organizations when it comes to sourcing for funds and reporting to donors. So as one of my respondents put here, Voran says that we try to explain to them, referring to the board members, that if they do not help us by meeting and those things, to show that we have a system, getting funding for our projects will be hard. And that will also mean a collapse of everything that we've stood for all these years. So you find that there is some reason for which, even though the boards are not functioning, they are there. They keep them there because time sometimes comes when they need them. And that was quite, in the so-called well-structured CSOs, when it comes to the issue of succession, even though their boards were functioning all right, but the other side, which has to do with executive successions and all of that, you find that these things were now being planned. And for many of even those organizations, they could not point to any succession plan, despite their years of operation and success that they've had. As you can find here, at the moment, under a kind of institutional renewal program that we have, within the next couple of years, you see, we actually will be coming up with more explicit principles, for leadership transitions. So this is a very popular organization. Names are not being mentioned here. This is a popular organization, and the executive director tells us this, that they are now thinking, about a system that will help them with their leadership transitions. And that is a common phenomenon that we find. Also, most practitioners and non-practitioners agree, at least, that many governing boards, as we are seeing in the narrative so far, in the CSO sector in Ghana, were not functional. They were not functional boards. They described them variously. Some of my participants, at least quite a number of them, especially from either the research field or from academia, describe them as decorative. And Razat here, the quote you see here is from Razat, who has spent several years in the civil society sector in Ghana, very known. And he says that, so while the board members should continue deciding on matters like who do we need to bring in and who amongst us is tired and needs to go home and all of that, this is not the case. It is not happening. And that is the reality. I have been in this space for long, and I can assure you that you won't find 3 out of 10 who really do that. They are too busy with their lives, so to speak. He's talking about the board. And this thing, Mays talks about it, the managerial hegemony thing. So even where the boss exists, they are busy. So everything is run by the executive or the management of these organizations. And one of Nat also, who is a researcher in the field, says that most of the time, I say we have a lot of decorative boards. You know, they are not functional, just decorative. So you find that while realizing that boards are important and the governance system is important, for most of these organizations, they exist only on paper. Now, what is also particularly interesting is the fact that the Department of Social Welfare, which in Ghana has some sort of oversight over the NGO sector, is very much aware of these things that are being shared with us. And one of the officers, very top officer in that office during the interview, said that their boards don't function. It functions when there is a need for funding issue or something that's coming in. Then quickly boards come around. And I know many of us can relate to this position that the officer shares. But as I said, it's just for the registration purposes. So the one registering them, the one certifying them as NGO knows that there is a named board, but they don't work. So we will know whether you also have experiences to share regarding these boards, which are fundamental, you know, when it comes to what governance within civil society organizations is all about. Then also, quite curiously, in discussing their systems, okay, and how they work in the organizations, many of the executive directors and officers in this sector tend to accentuate the system's overriding importance for being accountable to and also meeting the expectations of donors, rather than ensuring internal control and good governance practices. That was very obvious in the discussions that we had all through the study. Now, I take a quote once again in support of this point that they highlight the importance of their governance systems for being accountable to their funders and all of that. We adhere to all the reporting protocols, and here we're discussing whether the CSOs, their organization is accountable. And these are the discussions that come up. We adhere to all the reporting protocols of our funders. And we sometimes use different tools and styles to render accountability. You know, depending on the quarters your resources are coming from, the reporting protocols are different. And we try as much as possible to amend to each one of them. So beyond this, not much is done, you know, regarding accountability. You know, this has been just top down up accountability. There's no much of a lateral accountability going on, other to the internal subscribers of the organization and also to stakeholders, with other stakeholders, you know, in terms of colleagues or other CSOs in the sector. You know, anything we get from, and this is another quote from a senior program officer of a capacity development CSO. You know, anything we get from donors, we account for it. Most of the time, some tend not to value it. And even in accounting, for instance, it becomes problematic. So anytime you get money from a donor, in some sense, people think it's free money. So anytime you bring up a conversation around accountability and as relating to governance, you know, practice, most of our participants, research participants who are, you know, either executive directors or program officers, tend to shift the discussion to the comfort zone, of course, being accountable to funders. Now, where there are some institutionalized systems and processes, how effective are they? That was another question that we sought to answer in the research. And we grouped these governance dimensions under board, fiduciary, and oversight responsibilities, which came with a couple of questions. Then management systems and processes, and of course, succession planning was replacing planning in this mix. Then self-governance of the board, how the boards managed their own activities. Now, you find that when you look at the mean distribution, you find that board, fiduciary, and oversight is rated 2.3. This is not too clear, forgive me. Then management systems and processes is rated 2.6. Then succession planning, curiously again, is rated 1.7 in terms of how effective succession planning has been in the organizations. And these are practitioners rating their own organizations. Then when it comes to the board governing its own activities and following its own timelines and all of that, is rated 2.5. Now, this is out of a possible 5. So you find that management systems and the self-governance of the board are rated averagely. They are rated averagely. But when it comes to the actual work of the board and its oversight, as well as succession planning, it is rated quite poorly by our participants. And you can see that governance here can be described as lopsided in the sense that management systems and boards self-management are giving average rating compared to other important issues, you know. And we found also that the desire for flexibility, you know, from some of the participants, the desire for flexibility on the part of leaders of these organizations appeared to be the one of the key reasons why CSO leaders actually were okay with, you know, governing boards and systems that are weak. They actually enjoyed it, if I should put it that way, because it gave a lot of flexibility. I mean, you did not have to battle with any tough, you know, board members trying to show you what to do and all of that. So that was very common in the system. Here, we try to compare whether there's any relationship between the level of governance, systems institutionalization, and the type of organization. When we say type of organization, we are talking about whether the organization is a solitary one, an individual organization, or it's a network. Networks and coalitions and all of that were brought together under network. Then individual organizations are those that are registered by single individuals and all of that. And whether the organizations had international operations, is it regional or is it just in country, is it just at the district level? We wanted to know whether there's any relationship between that and the structures and their institutionalization. And we came to a realization that for many of the individual organizations, structures and systems were rated very low in terms of their institutionalization. They were not really institutionalized. Just about 13.2% of the organizations in this study rated their systems high. Then networks are not exactly like that. Even though they are low, they are quite high compared to. And the differences that were observed between individuals and networks was found to be statistically significant. The same thing was done for international organizations or organizations with international operations. But over there, you realize that the difference is not significant. Whether it is individual or a network, they all appear to have some effectiveness in their institutionalization of the systems. Then we also look at the effectiveness, and the outcome is the same, quite similar to what I just presented, And that could not be computed for the international organizations because they were all rated as high in terms of how effective their systems were.
Hello,
many of the, yes.
Kindly start wrapping up, please.
All right. Many of the deficits that were being seen in the sector, was attributed to a few factors, 4 of them being the lack of understanding on the part of some of the board members regarding their place in the organization, the composition of the board, usually to include friends and family, and the founders' lack of understanding of the value of governing boards, and of course, the lack of, if you like, clear distinction between the role of the board and that of the management, which becomes the foundational problem for the whole sector, which I discussed in terms of its sustainability. So the sector's continuous existence and effectiveness, is not guaranteed if they are poorly governed, and that has to be made clear. And when the organizations do not have the resources, both financial and human, to pursue their objectives. Some CSOs have worked on their systems, and they have long-term administrative and financial policies and all of that. That notwithstanding, governance and transition issues have still persisted and continue to be an important deficiency in the non-profit, sustainability discourse. And this is because of bad experiences of leadership transitions in the sector. And I'm sure we can discuss these matters further. Now, my concluding remarks. The study found that many of the CSOs that participated were poorly instituting their governance structures and systems, and they were largely ineffective. There were barely any formal succession plans that were come across or found in the field study, and this ineffective management of executive transitions and abrupt, departures of key staff was also mentioned during the study a lot, and this was mainly due to the absence of roadmaps and clear succession plans. And I argue, or the paper argues, that the absence of sound governance systems and structures, in the absence of these, a CSO cannot properly be described as being sustainable, irrespective of the amount of resources that these organizations can command, because it all comes back to leadership, and these organizations could just cram down any day. I have some recommendations here. A regulatory regime for non-profit organizations, which is separate from the existing company law in Ghana, because this study is based in Ghana. And also, of course, planning and effectively implementing leadership development policies. Governing boards, ought to begin to own the management of executive level transitions, and that is very important for the sustainability of the sector. Thank you very much for your audience. I know that the discussions could go on and we could clarify a few things where necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Solomon. Very brilliant presentation here, and very, very insightful points you've shared with us. I wouldn't try to summarize that because it was very clear, but one thing that struck me is that no sound governance systems can lead to no sustainability. So if we don't put in place sound governance systems within our institutions, we are likely not to be sustainable. And hence all the other factors, the one-man organization, lack of accountability, weak board governance, abrupt departure of staff, these are all things we need to factor in. I am sure many of us have questions. We wouldn't take the questions now, but keep your questions because we will definitely have some time for questions. We want to just break out into groups to quickly discuss some of these burning issues that have been raised by Dr. Solomon through this study which he conducted in Ghana. So automatically, our tech team will send us into 4 groups. And once again, once we move into these groups, let us be quick to have a volunteer to moderate our discussions based on the questions that will be shared for your group. Then secondly, we should equally have a note taker who will take the salient points and then present to the plenary when we come back. So for the 4 groups, each group will have a waxy representative who will just at the beginning project what you have to be discussing. Then your moderator or your facilitator and the note taker can take it up from there. However, just to give us an insight on the key issues that will be discussed in each of these groups, Group 1 will be looking at the governance systems and structures within our organizations. What are some of the internal weaknesses or challenges faced by CSOs that make it difficult to have a smooth leadership transition? Group 2 will be looking at strengthening organizational leadership. So what are measures or what measures must we consider while preparing to face the impending leadership transitions within our organizations? Then Group 3, we'll be focusing on complementary support to CSO. So yes, we are acknowledging that there are challenges. However, what kind of support do we need from ourselves, from different stakeholders? It will just be good to discuss the possible forms of support that can be given to our respective organizations. Then Group 4 will be looking at the founder syndrome. Dr. Solomon highlighted, evidence how someone created the organization, and for the first 5 years, it was practically him, and his organization in his suitcase. Yes, post that he started doing something, but what is the likely effect of his organization, my organization, that my factor on the overall management or governance of the organization? So Group 4 will be looking at the founder syndrome. At this juncture, colleagues, kindly bear with us as our technical team sends us into our respective groups. Thank you very much. It's going to be done automatically, and in each group we have just 30 minutes, after which Zoom will automatically bring us back to the plenary. So we will be moving into the breakout rooms now. Thanks for your patience. Great. And remember, feel free to volunteer to be the facilitator in your group. Great. Thank you, everyone, and welcome on board. We are very grateful for the engaging and thrilling discussions that we had in our respective groups. We will not waste much time. We'll just leave the floor open for us to present what we discussed. And we are just going to begin from group 1 to group 4. Please, each group will have 3 minutes to briefly, clearly state out the key points that we need to look up to, as we reflect on these issues. So without wasting much time, group 1, who was the note taker of group 1, please?
Do you mean room 1?
Yes, room 1.
Okay, so it's Catherine.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. You have the floor, ma'am.
Can you take the question again? Okay, so a number of the members of the group shared their experiences with the governance structures. And some of the areas of concerns that we noted are that most civil society organizations are donor-driven. And therefore, because of that, most of the time, the institutions depart from their values and the reasons why they were formed. There's also the issue of funding challenges for succession planning. Succession planning, we discussed that it needs resources, and because of funding challenges, most of the time this is not able to happen. We also touched on the founder-leader syndrome, which is a challenge and a weakness in civil society organizations. We also realized that because most organizations don't have the succession plans, there's no framework for filling leadership positions when they become vacant. So whatever is done on ad hoc basis. And then also one challenge is that most organizations do not value the existence of the board. Board membership for the organizations is just for ticking boxes, as we noted in the research and the findings. Yeah, so those are some of the concerns that I noted for room 1.
All right. Thank you very much for that very brilliant capture of the discussions that ensued. Any 1 or 2 additional remarks from group 1, or can we move to group 2, please? Okay, thank you very much. Well done, group 1. We appreciate your input. Group 2, please. Who was the note taker for group 2?
Yes.
Great.
Hello.
Strengthening organizational leadership. Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim. I'm sorry, I'm Sman Samasi. I'm happy to be back again in my former family. So please, can you go back to the slides, the question, please? Hello? Hello?
Yes, please, we are setting that up.
Okay, great.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, thank you very much. Regarding the first question, what we identified were among others, mentoring and coaching is key. we think that when mentoring and coaching are encouraged in our organizations, so succession won't be cause a lot of problems. So because we know when people are well mentored and also coached, in case the lead depart from the organization, we may not have that issue. We also think that having organizational development policy documents will also help, because in those documents, everything is clearly stated. Who should come when there is a departure. So having those documents will also help the organization to manage some of those crises. The transfer of knowledge, which also has a connection with the first bullet point I mentioned, which is mentoring and coaching, should also be strengthened. And we also think that exchanges program between and within organizations are very, very important. So it will allow organizations to understand what other organizations are doing in terms of program. So I think it's also recommended that when staff come to an institution, they should stay longer than leaving early, because sometimes it also creates problems. So we encourage that when staff come to an organization, instead of going 1 or 2 months after, they should stay longer. So having also administrative policy document, financial policy documents, gender policy documents, welfare policies will also help in case of any sudden exit. So regarding the second question, we think that when we have all the documents that I just mentioned with the various policies, for me, this second question won't have a lot of issues, because all the documents or all the policies put in place will talk about those sessions, when it happened, how to manage situation like that. So if the institution has those policies, so it won't create a lot of problems. We also think that competency should be valued. Whenever we are talking about those situations. I think these are some of the things we put together. So if other members of the group have other points, what I omitted, so they can come in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samasi, for those very rich contributions. Group 2, well done. We very much appreciate your insightful contributions to this. And as I was listening to them, even for those from Group 1, I was like, we are telling ourselves some of the key things we need to take into consideration after this session to enhance, governance processes and systems within our organizations. At this juncture, if there is no further contribution from Group 2, we are going to move to
there is. I want to just expand things.
All right. 1
Can
minute,
I
please.
expand something on Group 2? Group 2,
yes, please.
Further one. Yes, just our presenter mentioned about exchange programs and within and across. I think one thing CSOs are lacking is the mentorship, that you can send somebody from one organization to go and study a CEO or somebody in another organization and learn and come back and practice. In the private sector, some of them are doing it and it's helping. So this one is totally lacking. We are becoming too competitive in nature, and it's unhealthy. So if we can champion this one, learn from each other, so that because we all, at the final analysis, we all have one goal to help develop our society. So we should not be doing unhealthy competition. Thank you, over.
What a brilliant contribution there. And just to say that there are organizations like LEAP in Nigeria, there are organizations like WANEP, which is based across the region. Their regional offices in Accra. There's NIPO in Liberia. There is OSIWA in Dakar. We captured their case studies, on how they manage leadership transitions. And I think these are organizations we can look up to. We will send the link to that report or that piece of work here. It was authored by Christian Elonge and Catherine Adakwa. We will send the link so you can read and you can contact them to find out if you can have exchange visits, to learn from their practices and not leaving out waxy, of course. Thank you very much. Group 3. Who was the note taker? Who would like to take the floor, please?
Okay, thank you, Jim. For group 3, this is Mabel. Okay, with respect to proposing key modalities for establishing a workable self-regulatory regime, we noticed that most CSOs don't involve their board members in their projects. So we're saying that the executives of the CSOs, they should try as much as possible to involve all their board members on a daily basis. They should not just wait for a particular project to come up.
You said on Thursday.
Hello.
Please, can we mute our mics if we are not talking, please?
Okay, I was saying that most NGOs don't involve their board members in their daily activities. So we're proposing that the executives of the NGOs should regularly involve their board members. They should not only wait for when there's a project that's coming up and they start seeking for their advice. And the board members should be able to provide directions to the NGOs. That's the NGOs should delegate activity, they should delegate tasks to all the board members, and they should do follow-up to be able to ensure that they get responses. Then with regards to leadership strengthening and leadership transitions, they said that it was key for organizations to develop a guide. And this guide could be per country, it could be per CSO. This guide should be able to guide individuals so that they can systematically, in case they want to create an institution, it should be a systematic process. And this guide should be able to define the principles in terms of leadership transition as well as the operations. And if it is done at the country level, it should involve all the CSOs. If it is done at the CSO level, it should be they should involve all the staff of each of the CSOs. And then they should also develop an entity that will be in charge of implementing these principles, because developing the principles is one thing and implementing them too is another thing. And regulations on the implementation of these principles should also be established. On the points of how CSOs can be supported to better plan for leadership transitions, I said it is not enough for the board members to just meet up, but some executives can also partition their boards into different committees. Like they can set up different committees among the board members. And these committees should be able to meet up before the general board meetings. So the meetings of these committees should be as frequent as the board meetings. This way, it's easy for them to actually get prepared before the main board meetings. And we also talked about mentorship, like the speaker of Group 2 mentioned, the issue of mentorship. The board members should be able to have a good mentorship platform for their executives. And then we also mentioned the fact that you are a leader in an organization doesn't mean that you have all the ideas. So they're saying that the people involved in every CSO, the leaders of this CSO should be able to seek advice, should be able to seek the ideas from the different staff members. They should not wait when they have gotten to the point of no option before they start seeking for participants' ideas, because nobody likes being last resort to a solution. Everybody likes to participate. So it's important for leaders to involve their staff members during meetings, during projects. And then they talked about knowledge management, how we handle people, how we train, the training sessions, how we get to train people who are coming in, those who are going out, how we develop standard operating procedures, how much innovation and technology we bring in, and the provision of in-service trainings. Then we also talked about leveraging on technology, like the use of cloud services, such that information is always systematic and coherent. Then the last point we talked about was delegating responsibilities to junior staff, because it has been noticed that there are some junior staff, there are some interns who actually have great skills that the organizations could leverage on. So it's important that CSOs delegate responsibilities to junior staff. This is going to be able to groom them to becoming more responsible and will give them opportunities to build up on their skills that will enable them to take up leadership positions. So far, that was what we talked about.
Great. Thank you very much for those wonderful points, members of Group 3. Any additions, or can we move on? I think they were quite elaborate, but does any member of the group want to clarify on one thing, or we can move to Group 4, please? All right. Thank you very much, members of Group 3, and thank you, the colleague from Group 3, Mabel, for doing justice to the discussions within your group. We are going to move to Group 4 to talk about the founder syndrome. I love this so much, and it's something we've been talking about within the sector for years. Yet it seems to be persistent. It seems to be a real canker within the system, and we hope that Group 4 will give us some tips on how to move from the founder syndrome to a more active and credible entity. Yes, note taker of Group 4. Thank you.
I'm here. This is Charles. I'm doing with Dan Ladi.
Oh, great. Please,
all right,
please.
All right. Okay, thank you so much. So we had a lot of diverse experiences, but we came to the same conclusion from different countries. So one of the things we said is that the founder syndrome is not a peculiar case to Ghana, in reference to the research that was done by Dr. Amwa, that it exists in Nigeria, in Sierra Leone, in Cote d'Ivoire, basically across the region and even beyond. And that the bottom line is that there's just a lack of plans for upward mobility, right? And so the challenges we saw with the founder syndrome was that what happens is that founders become the face of the organization in all spaces. And we emphasis here on all spaces, in meetings, in conference spaces, engagements with donors, in all the available spaces. And so the organization does not build that kind of what you call institutional muscle beyond that founder. The founder is the organization and the organization is the founder. And then no decisions are made in the absence of the founder. So when the founder is not there, no decisions are made. These are some of the challenges. It leads to, of course, ineffective leadership and accountability. Then it leads to a lack, and then of course, the lack of funding sometimes leads to excessive responsibilities on founders. So what we found out was that some founders are saying that the reason why they seem to be everywhere and doing everything is because there's a lack of funding to build a team. Then there's, of course, the problem of inactive board members, which perpetuates founders taking more responsibilities. And because the boards are mostly decorative boards and are not functional, the founder is found in a place where they are taking more responsibilities than they should. They are doing both governance, management, and basically everywhere. And this also leads to the founder syndrome. We also saw that it leads to poor relational skills, right? Because the founder is at the center of everything. Whatever the person says goes, and it creates a lot of friction within the organization. And then we saw that basically there's an absence of bottom-up succession planning. So what we saw that there's such an emphasis on succession planning at the executive leadership level, but we've seen that effective succession planning actually starts right from the bottom of the organization, right from the operational level all the way to the executive level. And so the measures that we proposed in terms of curing this challenge was one of the things that needs to be done is a mindset shift towards leadership transitions. So really reorienting our mindset to see that transitioning and succession planning is a part of the leadership journey, and that is not something that is strange, that it should become a part of our culture and the way we do things. And then a deliberate bottom-up succession planning, something that should be inculcated within our organizations. There should be more investments in training on governance and leadership transition planning, more research, documentation, and shared learning on leadership renewal. Renewal here, we're talking about not only the transitioning, but how do we ensure there's more dynamism in terms of leadership at all levels of an organization. And then, of course, strengthen board governance within the sector, and a much more investment, a much more deeper look at our boards and how to strengthen board governance. And then as capacity building for executive leadership is extremely important, creating networking and communities of practice around this issue and having discussions, sharing experiences, not only within West Africa, but also sharing experiences from Southern Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and even beyond will help us. And then strengthening internal accountability and transparency to build ownership from staff. And one of the things that was said was that one of the reasons why there's a lack of transition, there's a lack of understanding of staff of the importance of transitioning at all levels is that there's no accountability and there's no transparency within organizations. And that's something that we need to work more to build ownership. And then one recommendation was that WACSI and other organizations like WACSI that work on strengthening civil society and donors have a very pivotal role to play. We need to find a way to incentivize, and that's the word that was used, to incentivize good governance and leadership transition planning. So one of the recommendations was that, look, before organizations participate in our programs or benefit from some of our technology, products, and services, they need to show that they are practicing good governance and leadership succession planning. And then funds should be reserved. And this is advocacy to the donors. When you're looking at sustainability and resilience, one of the areas that need to be looked at in terms of funding is funds should be reserved for leadership succession planning. And we thought that this is important to support this process so it becomes much more deliberate in the way our organizations function. So thank you very much. I don't know if Danladi, you want to add a few things.
Yes, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Charles. Happy to be back home again. You've summed up everything, almost everything that we said, but suffice it to say that the founder syndrome actually poses an endemic challenge, a sort of existential threat to the future of CSOs in the region, especially in Nigeria here. And we agree that it's high time founders begin to think about death. People don't think about tomorrow. We see cases how people die. And in Nigeria here, we've seen organizations where immediately the founders is gone, that becomes the end of, the organization. So for sustainability of CSOs in Nigeria beyond and the region, beyond financial sustainability, conscientious effort must be made towards, deepening or creating awareness in form of conferences, in form of seminars, and even some of this kind of workshop where we sample, we identify some of the founders, some of the organizations we think have had their founders stayed for too long to pose critical questions to them directly. I mean, for instance, why have you stayed for more than 20, 25 years in your organization? What if tomorrow you are no more? Do you have succession plan? So we also say that some governments, some state governments, particularly in Nigeria, is taking proactive steps towards addressing this issue. More recently, last year, 2 years ago, there was this NGO bill. And what the government was saying was that we have seen so much faces, 2, 3 faces leading the same organization for more than 3 decades, speaking for human rights, speaking for social justice. Is it that there's no someone else again in such organization that should also champion the same cause? And so they are saying 10 years, maximum of 10 years, you cannot be the CEO or the ED of an organization, that someone else should begin to do that. And so Group 4 did actually agree that there's need for in-house training and capacity training for CSO leaders in the region, especially founders, to make them see reasons why they should engage in a progressive succession planning for the organization. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Group 4, and to all the other groups for those brilliant presentations. Wonderful learning. Once again, if you have questions, you can start sending them in the chat, and we will take them after the next presentation. But I can see a colleague is burning to contribute. So while Mr. Christian Elonge will be setting up his slide, for us, I'll call on Awal Ahmed Kariama. 1 minute, please. Awal.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I want to respond to Group 3. They raised a very interesting issue, and it has to do with the issue of board members participating in the day-to-day learning of the organization. I think that's a red flag. We must talk deeply about it, because once board members begin to engage in the daily running of the organization, that it might lead to micromanaging and might diffuse the ability of the executive directors and other programs to grow the organization, depending on the quality of the board. So I wanted us to flag that and talk about it in detail. Thank you.
Right. I think that's a very important point. Let us hear what maybe Mr. Christian's presentation will address those. And just to say that, to acknowledge Mr. Christian, together with Catherine Adakwa, the head of admin of WAXI, they conducted a year-long study to capture existing case studies of organizations in our region that have been able to put in place successful leadership transition plans and have actually changed their leaderships within the organizations. Talking here, we have that publication captures the case of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa in Dakar, NIPO in Liberia, WAXI in Ghana, and the West Africa Network for Peace Building also in Ghana. We will share the link in this in the chat section so you can read it when you have time. But at this juncture, thank you once again, Catherine. Thank you, Christian, for contributing to the body of knowledge. And here we are tapping from your experience, tapping from the depth of work you contributed to the work we are doing. You have the floor, Christian. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jim. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. So as Jim has said, we decided with Catherine to document experience of nonprofit from West Africa in terms of succession planning and leadership transition. So this presentation basically will present some of the key research findings and best practices that we have observed from civil society in Africa. So as we have all said, a lot of nonprofit are not aware of the need of, establishing strong system to manage leadership transition. So it has been revealed by research that about only 27 nonprofit, are having a written succession planning in place. And in Africa, many organizations who are talking about it are not having a clearly documented procedure about succession planning. So we do hope that by the end of this knowledge cafe, that all of us are going to be encouraged to document and have a formal succession planning document, because if we don't do it, these are some of the things that we may be exposed. So as we have said, we talk about the founder syndrome, which is one of the reasons why many people are afraid of thinking about succession planning. We talk about the financial resources. Sometimes also it may require investment to train, or to create a mentor-friendly or knowledge-sharing culture. We also talk about the fact that within CSO, many people are not thinking about this because there is a low emphasis on building systemic processes by CSO. Many CSO are more oriented towards spontaneous action, but they don't think, much of them, long-term and building systemic and holistic systems. So the consequence of not having a succession planning, I think, is also important for us to get to understand that. I think Charles Van Dyke has highlighted one of those elements, that it could also be good that it is being enforced as one of the key requirements of maybe granting funding, or one of the key requirements of assessing the organizational health of an NGO. So when we are not having a strong succession planning, we can have donors who can lose confidence. We can have power struggle, because when there is a leader who is leaving, anyone will be fighting, everyone will be pushing to be the one taking in charge. So to avoid those things, it is important for us to think about succession planning now. So as we think about it, here are the 4 key research findings that we got at the end of the research with Mrs. Catherine. The first one being that effective leadership transition, whether it is planned or unplanned, it requires strategic preparation. Usually, I usually say that it's good to prepare for the opportunity before the opportunity comes than not to prepare and the opportunity arise. So preparation is key. The second key fact is the fact that we notice that poor board governance also is attributed to the quality of the succession planning process. The third one is that leadership development, talent development, they are key value practices that have contributed in the successful implementation of a leadership transition. For example, when we look at WANEP, when we look at OSIWA or those NWACSI, we have observed that there is a good environment, there is a good employee retention strategy. Like there are measures that were in place to contribute to the grooming, to contribute to the leadership development of the staff in such a way that whenever there is a need, it was easier for someone to step in. It was easier for someone to take over with the leadership role. Now, how to execute a leadership transition? Here are just few steps. You can personalize it depending on your own realities. But in general, the first key thing is to clarify the organization vision. Where is your organization going? Where are you? What are you trying to achieve? When that is being clarified, it's also important to identify what are your strategies and objectives. What are the leadership requirements? The one who has to step in, what does he need to have? For example, in our small group, breakout room number 2, one of the members of the team share how it's very important to have emotional intelligence, because not everyone who has the skills always have the attitude to be a leader. So it's very important that for each job that there is a clear identification of what is needed. Now you have to evaluate the organization and also the candidate. Are the candidates aligned with the vision? Are the candidates aligned with the values? Are the candidates aligned with the culture of the organization? And when that is being established, should now develop a process of how should it go, and now you implement your transition plan. Now, here are some best practices that we have observed. The first one is about having a strategic plan, because the strategic plan is going to have the key guidelines, the key element that need to be considered for this succession planning, either at the management level or at the board level. So for example, in the analysis that our colleague, Dr. Solomon Amwa, shared in the beginning, he has realized that very few organizations have such strategic plan in place. Most of them are like they are managing leadership transition in a ad hoc way. You know, there is not a clear way, a clear framework to go through it. And usually, in some cases, when it is about, let's say, a board transition or the executive director position, it is recommended or it is good to have a succession planning committee, which is basically key leadership members who are going to supervise or monitor how the process is going. The third key element is about developing a knowledge sharing culture. I think he has also been highlighted in the group number 3, a knowledge sharing culture where people feel comfortable about sharing their experiences. People feel comfortable about providing guidelines, providing advices, mentoring, or coaching others, because usually it is best when the successor is coming from inside, so that he's already imbibed, he's already aware of the knowledge, he's already aware of the organizational culture and values, so he can easily step in the new role and continue without having a break in the flow of the organizational operations. And if we take the example of WAXI here, we see that WAXI is having a holistic, environment that grooms staff, that grooms interns, that group volunteers, so that they are always prepared to take over when there is a vacancy that arises. And this is visible in how long members are staying within the organization. Whenever you see an organization where people are moving from one leadership position to the other and they are staying in the long term within the organization, those are some of the indicators that the knowledge sharing culture, the leadership transition processes are being effective. Now, the fourth component is about establishing a talent development system. I think this is quite similar to the previous one, just that the talent development system is more structured, it's more formal. You know what needs to be done in order for each member of the team to grow within the organization. For example, if we take the example of OneUp, they do organize regular staff capacity building so that the team is going to be prepared to effectively deliver the organization mission. And they are also prepared to take over the next leadership position. So we have the case, for example, of the current executive director of the organization, Dr. Eze, who has been, starting not low, but, at the bottom, and he has been gradually moving at each stage of the organization from Nigeria to Ghana, where he is actually. We are going to look at that more specifically in the case studies. The final steps is basically about executing the leadership, the transition. And the best practice here is that, if possible, the one going should serve as a mentor. I think this is a very good one, so that he can, prepare accordingly, he can prepare conveniently. And also, this is something key. If possible, when a senior staff is leaving, if he can have the possibility of recommending or grooming the successor, or even recommending, yes, that would be great, because that's going to create a more conducive environment for knowledge transfer. And it's also important when executing the transition to dedicate enough time and not to do it in a rushing way. So all those elements are being, synthesized here. The first one is about having the talent development system. The second one is about being aware and being able to identify, leadership talent within the organization, developing that talent, and now executing the succession effectively. Now, here are some few case studies. For example, at Osiwa is having a succession plan policy. They also have an employee retention strategy. So for those of us who are not having such system, let's endeavor, let's plan to do it. At Osiwa also, the unit heads are being required to develop junior colleagues, and it is being considered as, one of their annual performance on which they are being assessed. So one way in your organization, you can also do something similar of integrating, junior staff development among the indicators of assessing the senior staff. is going to encourage them to work towards that. At the level of the board, you know, each board member at Osiwa is selected for a limited duration, usually 2 years, and it is only renewable once, you know, so that we can have fresh ideas coming in and people serving, giving their best during the time frame that they are being allocated in the organization. WAXI experience in terms of succession planning. So I yearly say that we had we are not have WAXI is not having a formal succession planning strategy, but there is a formal employee retention strategy, which is visible through the good working conditions. I think we talk about employee welfare. Everyone would like to stay when he's being catered well. We can have periodic salary increase, health insurance for those who are staying for long period and all that. We have job security, staff orientation and induction at WAXI. Everyone who is coming as a new staff is being guided through the organizational processes. And we have also the notice of resignation, so that the organization as an institute can prepare accordingly to identify and prepare the one who will be coming later. So some of the lessons learned from WAXI. The first one is that it's about timing. There shouldn't be waiting when there is a need to start seeking the solution. But change is always permanent. Change is something that happens always. So it is very important for organizations who desire to have a strong leadership to plan for it long time before, and ideally 1 year or 2 years before. It's important also to involve the board in the succession planning processes, you know, and also to learn from previous experiences. What do we mean by that? So, for example, if there have been cases where someone left the organization and things didn't work out well, it's important that the organization learn from it. What didn't work out well? How can we do it better next time? And if it is working effectively, you know, it's important to document those best practices and to enforce them to become institutionalized. Some key lessons, as we have said, planning long time in advance, junior staff being groomed by senior staff, you know, ensuring good working conditions. And this element is key. I would like to highlight it. Most organizations, this is a lesson learned from NIPO in Liberia, you know, is the fact that the same way you are paying attention, or we do it in a professional way for executive director positions or the board members position, we should also endeavor to do it for non-executive staff. It's very important. It shouldn't just be for higher or influential leadership roles within the organization, you know. And it's important also to institutionalize mandatory maximum tenure. This is also one way of avoiding the founder syndrome. You know, if there are policies that clearly state the number of years that one can stay within a role, in the institutional or administrative policies, it can reduce, you know, the founder syndrome impact. And based on contextual realities, transition process can either be formal or informal. It all depends on how well the organization environment is. So in conclusion, I think one can say that succession planning is not a one-off event, it's a continuous process. It should be something that should be institutionalized, it should be integrated within each unit, within each department of organization. It is a bottom-up approach, it's not a top-down approach. Also, CSO in Africa, beyond just awareness, beyond just attending to this knowledge cafe, yes, it's good to be informed, it's good to be knowledgeable about the need of it, but what do we do later? What actions are we taking? You know, and it's important for us to also know that there is no gain without pain, you know, and those who run away from pain are going to lose, or they're not going to gain. So as far as we are getting knowledge about how to do it and all that, we need to, you know, round up our sleeves and go on the ground and start working on developing those policies, start working on integrating those ideas within our organization. Because if it is true that knowledge is power, but knowledge is only power when it is being applied. If we don't apply what we are understanding from here, the system is not going to be changed. And it's also important to share about some initiatives that has been done, in order to enforce this. For example, we have ANOVA and AROXA. AROXA is an association for research on civil society in Africa. They have a succession planning or leadership transition fellowship where they sponsor organizations who are planning to execute leadership transition. There is a fellowship, there is a training that they are doing for that, mostly for executive director or board members. So there are actually efforts that are being done within the society sector to enforce this and to make it an integral component and integral practices within the nonprofit sector. We shouldn't run away from those discussions. We should face them, because our ability of conducting effective and smooth leadership transition is going to affect our sustainability. So that's what I would like to close on. Thank you for listening, and let's move now to questions, engagement, contribution, complementary information. And thank you also for all those who are participating in this discussion. Thank you. Back to Jim, please.
Thank you very, very much, Christian. You've done justice to that paper, and we are sharing all those resources in the chat section. So colleagues, you can go to the chat section and see there are some pieces of updates that our colleagues are putting there for us. So we will just take 3 questions. We are very sorry, I think we've exceeded the time significantly, but we will be wrapping up shortly, but we'll take 3 questions. Maybe I should say the initial observation about the extent of involvement of the board in the operations of the organization. Maybe we take that as one question. To what extent should we get the board involved in the operations of the organizations? Maybe someone from Group 1 will want to take that. By the way, I can see, if you have a question, kindly raise your hand. So I have Daniel Alimo. We are going to take 3 questions, so the first 3 hands to pop up. First come, first serve, please.
Jim.
Yes, please.
Please, I can't find that button. I have a question.
I like that. So, Swari, you have a question. So, Daniel, Swari, I like that. Or you can drop it in the chat. You can drop it in the chat. All right. Excuse me. So maybe we take the first question. To what extent should the board be involved in the operations of the organization? A colleague said that could be a red flag if the board is given that leeway to be involved in the day-to-day operations of the organization. I think it's Awal who raised that. So Rafiu, does anyone from Group 3 want to take that? Otherwise, I'm happy to address that. I think maybe I should just take that quickly. The point Group 3 was raising, to the best of my understanding, was that the board can further be split into committees just to ensure that the committees get a sense of involvement such that they can help the management of the organization to address any issues beyond leadership challenges within the organization, and to ensure that the board effectively participates or contributes to the growth and governance and oversight of the organization. These committees can meet, let me insist again, can meet regularly, ideally at the intervals of board meetings. So if board meetings are holding quarterly, then board committees should meet quarterly prior to board meetings so that they can feed back to the board and help the board as a whole to make an informed decision in terms of providing governance oversight to the organization. I hope that clarifies the nuance between level of engagement of the board in terms of supporting the organization to meet their objective. Thank you very much. Then I would like to take Daniel. Daniel, can you share your question, please? Daniel Alimu, your hand has been raised for a while now. A question and observation. Yes, please, Daniel.
Yes, thank you. I think I wanted to talk on the board issue, but you have clearly explained it. What is I wanted to add on that one is that the board is playing a strategic direction role. So day-to-day involvement in management and activity is a no. But I like the idea also that they should have a committee. Depending, the committee is not just committees, but depending on the area of operation of the organization, where they are critical focus area, they inform committee to respond to issues. Because the board will be receiving report, will be receiving briefing from management, so they can effectively participate, but not in the day-to-day affair of the organization. Otherwise, then you undermine management and the head of the management. So that is one. My second. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much for adding flesh to that. Very much appreciated, sir. Samase, you have the floor, please. And if you're directing your question to any of our speakers, feel free to mention whom you think can best address your question, please. You have the floor, Samase.
Yeah, I think the question goes to all the presenters. For sometimes I've observed, like when it comes to successions, you know, for instance, if the institution, you know, the executive director is going, and within the organization, you know, there is no, you know, person, if to say so, to replace him. And people have been in the institution for so long, but the institution is trying to, you know, fill in that gap. So how do we manage it? Because if the institution decides to bring someone outside, so how do we manage that, you know, frustration? Because certainly there will be, you know, anger, frustration. So how do we manage that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samase. Christian, I think I'll address that to you, but kindly just note it down. We have other questions. Then there is a question here from the person didn't identify him or herself. I can see TechnoSpark in the chat. Please, if you have board members and majority of them not active in contributing to ideas, what action should be done towards them? Solomon, permit me to address this question to you. So one question for Christian, one question for Solomon, and we are going to take the last question from, I hope that is the last hand that is raised. Yes, Abdul Rafiu, please. Abdul, your question. Daniel, can you please put down your hand? Thank you, sir. So Abdul, you have the floor, sir. Abdul?
Yes, okay. Hello.
Yes, please.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. My question is regarding the red flag that is actually an addition, and then I will ask a question. As you rightly said, we mentioning the involvement of the, what's the name, the board of directors isn't meant to undermine the executive board, their responsibilities, but just to update them on current happenings so that they will provide direction to the executive board or committee. So that is just a way of addition. But now on sustainability, is it possible or is it advisable for CSOs to get into the financial market? That is by way of floating, maybe buying shares and other things that will give them additional revenue to fund their activities because of the obvious reason. What is the obvious reason? The obvious reason is the unavailability of available funding or sources of funding currently. So is it advisable? Will you advise that CSOs that have the capacity, okay, they can invest in the aspects of the economy in the financial sector so that they can always use their dividend from the investment to fund their activities? That is my question.
All right, thank you very, very much. Very important question there. Just before I respond to that, let me just try to, Samase, are you there? I just want to capture your question well so that Christian can do justice in responding to it. So you are asking, in a situation where the leader of an organization is exiting and the organization does not find a competent replacement within the organization, the organization is about moving in favor of an external candidate, how can that transition be managed? Or how can that, let me say, psychological instability in case one is caused, where people have been in the organization for say 15, 20 years, but they are not found worthy to be the next leader, and the organization is going for an external candidate. How should that dilemma or flu situation be managed? Is that your question, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. So Christian, okay. I hope I'll come back to you. I'll also come to you shortly, Dr. Solomon, just to take on the question of our colleague Rafiu in terms of diversifying our mobilization of resources. I wouldn't dare to recommend that you should get into the financial markets. We haven't, as WAPSI, we haven't explored empirically how that can be of added value to organizations, but we have a publication on 12 alternative means of mobilizing resources that have been tested and have been successful, for organizations across the African continent. My colleagues, again, will share that resource here as a link, so you can click and read them and see which of them is suitable for your organization. There are 12 alternative funding models which you can explore. So far, we've not really dared into the financial market, and I'm really looking at Bitcoin, stuff like that, because some of those things have their risks, and they can have credibility implications. So it's careful for you to explore carefully what is suitable, what is legally accepted within your country, within your environment, so that you can take an action that will not affect the credibility of your organization, yet give you the results that you want. So at this juncture, I would like to go to Christian. Christian, would you like to go first?
Okay. Yes, so concerning the question of Mr. Ansuman, in the case where someone needs to come from outside because internally there has not been sufficient competencies to step up in the vacant role. I think that this is something that happens very regularly within the nonprofit sector, and one way to minimize it is to have administrative procedure concerning leadership transition and what are the requirements in such a way that whenever people have agreed onto it, we can use it as a basis to justify why they are not eligible for that leadership role, even though they are within. Because people should understand that organizations, even though organizations are like family system, but it's not about being emotional, it's about being objective. And when we are being objective, the right person should be at the right place. You shouldn't be in the leadership role because you have been there for long. If that was the case, then the elephant would have been the strongest, the king of the jungle because he's the biggest. So it's not about, how big or how long you have been there. It's about the mindset, the skill set that you have. So I think having administrative procedure can minimize that. The second thing is that the leader who is coming, he should be aware that there are people internally who may have the desire to step up into that role. So it requires emotional intelligence in such a way that he should be able to know that, yes, I am an outsider and I'm meeting new people inside. So the way I conduct myself is rather going to facilitate or impede, the my integration process. So it should be like, involving them in decision making so that they can also feel like, yes, I may not be in that position, but I am still relevant. I am still influencing the trajectory or the decision making processes of the organization. But since we are running out of time, just those two things. First, ensuring that there is administrative procedure which clarify the requirement to step up into leadership role so that it can be used as an objective basis to exclude those who are not, fitting those requirements. And secondly, from the outsider coming inside, he needs to be emotionally intelligent, be people-oriented, and involve those that he could have taken up that role into the decision making, so that they will feel secure, they will not feel threatened, and why not provide them with some, incentive or work advantages because of their long-term being in the organization. But definitely it should have been a leadership position should not be given because of emotions or subjectivity, but only because of competencies, if the organization really wants to grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insightful tips that you're sharing with us. Dr. Solomon, again, the question for you is from Al Hassan Nuhu. Please, if you have board members and majority of them not active in contributing to ideas, what action should be done towards them? Dr. Solomon?
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the good question. I want to acknowledge also the insights shared by Christian. I mean, he has shared, the how, and I think it's very interesting. But before I go to my question, please permit me to say that the issue of internal, external candidates when it comes to succession is very important. And I think beyond our discussion here, we should be taking seriously what Christian has just shared, and even learning more about how to handle those situations. Because I met a situation during my research where a former executive director tells me what happened when he was being recruited. He was outside and he saw a call in the graphics and he applied. And when he went for the interview, the one who was invited in at the interview to take minutes or to take notes, to help them serve as a secretary to the panel, was someone who has been working in the organization and was so interested in the position somewhat. I don't know whether the board was aware or not, but you can imagine how a situation like that looks like and what it means for the organization. And this person, after this executive director was recruited, exited the organization immediately. So those are very important issues. I mean, replacing people can be very heated and all of that. So we should take them seriously. Now to the substantive question. When you have board members who are not adding value, I mean, it is the more important reason why we keep advising, especially you practitioners, keep advising that the board should be a board that keeps renewing itself. I mean, I shared a quote where a researcher shared about the board should be searching itself, who is tired, who is not contributing. There should be a system, a properly functioning board should be one that all members are effectively contributing. And if that is not happening, the board, first of all, needs to renew itself. And this has to be established. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to pull someone out, If there's a system whereby the board has a way of renewing itself and replacing people who are not adding value, even people who are contributing so well, they still need to be replaced at some point, depending on the strategic, direction that the organization is taking within a particular strategic cycle. So you renew the board on the basis of where you are going. So if there are people who are not adding value, to the board, there should be a renewal process. That's why we are saying right from the beginning, there should be a transition plan. I mean, there should be a way that the board is able to assess itself and renew. It's not for the executive director. For many of our practitioners in our part of the world, executive directors have been kicking board members in and out. That's not how it works. The board itself must be renewing itself, and there should be a plan in so doing. So I think where board members are not adding value, they are just supposed to be replaced with people who add value. I think as practitioners, you may have something you want to add to what I've said. Thank you.
Yes, if I just want to quickly also add that, you know, it's also good to clarify expectation, because I've noticed that sometimes the board, from the executive director perspective, is not bringing added value because, you know, the board does not himself, or like the board members are not clearly knowing what is being expected from them. So I think that it's very good to always clarify expectation, and if possible to have, as you have said, board performance assessment and clear output that is being expected from them, so that whenever they are not performing, there are objective, you know, standard or indicators that will be there to prove that. Yes, thank you.
Wow, excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you for these rich, insightful perspectives. They are really helping us, and we really appreciate your time. We are inviting our colleagues to share another publication by Charles Kojo van Dijk, the head of capacity development at WACC, on board governance. It takes you through the cycle of an effectively functioning board, and the link will be shared in the chat. Don't hesitate to take all these resources, explore them, and see how best you can make use of them in your organizations. At this juncture, I think we have a colleague who is itchy to share an insight on the investments by organizations, you know, in the financial markets. He is more savvy in terms of finances and can best recommend what our organizations can delve into when it comes to striving for sustainability with the numerous financial markets at our disposal. Mr. Samuel Appiah, you have 1 minute, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Yeah, so I just want to clarify, one, the reason why as civil society practitioners, we may not by the law that established us or the law that we have registered under, do not permit us to enter the financial markets in terms of the ones with high risks. The financial markets are broad, but then because we are by our nature not for profit, which means everything that we do, we are not seeking to get profit. Now, there's something in finance called the higher the risk, the higher the interest, the higher the risk. So what is permissible is normally the risk-free interest, the risk-free investment, and risk-free investments are what we know about treasury bills, because there's no risk attached. Now, as soon as you move into the financial market where you are buying shares and also investing in high-yielding income, then you are earning profit. And now this profit must be accounted for and pay tax. But also remember, by the virtue of the laws that establish our register under, we are not to make profit. So as soon as we move from that plane, then we are moving from different place. So now the link that Jim said he will share about sources of income streams that a civil society can venture in, there's one called social enterprise. The social enterprise one, you need to even establish the organization separately from your existing organization so that they would do the social enterprise where they can go in for some of these high risk investments or financial market and get income. And this income they will declare to tax authorities and pay tax on it. And the different profit they get, they can repatriate back to the organization for their operations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very insightful one. And I think on this note, with your permission, kindly bear with me to say we will no longer take any direct contributions on this. We are quite excited, close to 3 hours, 2 hours, 45 minutes, and we have 50 of us actively engaged in this conversation, and we are just having some very useful comments coming in. I just want to read one. Thank you very much to our presenters on this insightful subject. That is from Ngwasi Mwale, Dr. Ahmed Takudin Said. I hope I got the name right. He says, Dr. Solomon and Senior Christian, thank you both for your brilliant and insightful presentations. On that note, Waxy cannot thank you enough, Dr. Solomon. Waxy cannot thank you enough, Christian, for your enormous contributions to the work that we have been doing as an institute. We thank you for your ceaseless efforts to continuously contribute to the body of knowledge that we as civil society practitioners need to catalyze the great work that we are doing. We will continue to count on you and call on you, of course, because your contributions are always very invaluable. Again, colleagues, there are a lot of resources that we are sharing the links with you in the chat. Kindly take note of them. We will endeavor to share them via email. We are also going to have a report of these sessions. We want to thank all the rapporteurs and the moderators. Abdul Rafiu, you did a great job in moderating in your session, and Waxy is calling on you to hopefully moderate one of our future Knowledge Cafe sessions. So do not turn your back on us when we call on you, because you will definitely make a great moderator. At this juncture, we just want to put out a call to action. You can hear that we have all learned from the efforts and experiences of Dr. Solomon, Christian Elonge, and Madam Catherine, and all the participants in the different groups. We are appealing. We need concrete evidence on the work that civil society is doing. So we are appealing on you. I will just be sharing some tips on how you can contribute to this, to such platforms. But before I do that, I'll invite my colleague Nancy to share a link on the chat. Kindly click on that link and just take a quick survey. It should take about 3 minutes. It's just ticking, boxes and maybe putting 1 or 2 sentences as much as you can. That will enable us to organize such programs in the future that will be much more beneficial to us all. So the survey link will be shared in the chat. Kindly take it from the chat box that will be shared shortly. And so to contribute to this, we are going to share a call for papers. Waxy has this practice of opening up the space for any actor in any part of the world, who is interested in the work of civil society, particularly civil society in West Africa, to share your experiences with us. We have colleagues who have contributed on the role of civil society in natural resource governance in Nigeria, colleagues who have explored the added value of democracy to development across the continent, colleagues who have shared on interrogating leadership transitions in West Africa. That is what we've just explored today. Our colleague Charles has delved a lot into governance, organizational governance, board governance, and we are equally inviting you, if you're interested in gender issues, youth leadership, sustainability of civil society organizations, communications within organizations, do not hesitate to share with us, respond to our call for papers, and we will get back to you and see how best we can support you to get an outstanding piece, excuse me, an outstanding piece that other stakeholders can benefit from. This year, we are doing something very concrete. We want to understand the philanthropic practices that are existing in our region, that are existing in the global south and in our continent. We want to do this as a means to understand what are those philanthropic potentials that we have as the African people that we need to leverage on to complement the great work that our international stakeholders are doing to support development in the region or continent. So we've put out a call for case studies. The deadline is already closed, the 5th of April, but some of you from your experiences can already use these few days to capture something very succinct. We need 2,000 words a narrative. However, we have a form that we are requesting that you fill. The link has also been shared with all of us in the chat section for us to take note of. Dear colleagues, last year with support from Wilde Ganzen Foundation in the Netherlands, WACSI commissioned a research to understand the extent to which COVID-19 is impacting or has impacted our work. This research focused on the experiences of organizations in 6 West African countries: Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia. The reports have been published. They were released yesterday, so you can go to our website. The link again will be shared in the chat section for our exploration. But the very important thing is that we are going to be discussing these findings on the 14th of April. Kindly save the date, and we will be sending out a registration call so that you can join, learn, share your experiences again, so that together we can continue to nurture this culture of learning, this culture of data gathering and data use for the advancement of our work. Once again, dear colleagues, before I leave, or before we leave, we invite you to fill the post-session evaluation, because that is very, very important for us. We have close to 50 participants, so we are really looking forward to have 50 responses. That will really help us as we continue such practices in the future. But before we leave, I will just want to leave the floor. One word for Dr. Solomon and one word for Dr. I'm prophesying that Christian will become a doctor in the months to come. So Christian, take note of that. And maybe one participant, we just want one participant to raise your hand, and you will give a closing note on behalf of participants. Dr. Solomon, you have the floor. 1 minute, Doc.
Okay, thank you so much, Jim. Thank you, colleagues. I just want to say that I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to share with colleagues. It's been an engaging discussion. The breakout sessions and the return has been really engaging, and I wish we could be here for a little longer, but it's been great, and I've loved the conversation, and we should go on and have it. I just want to thank WACSI for always granting us the opportunity, to have a proper link between academia and civil society practice. And I think it's a great work you are doing. And the knowledge that you are encouraging and sharing, we find it so great. And I want to congratulate you, WACSI, for the good work. I'm so grateful, seriously, for the opportunity, and we'll always be here to participate. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Doc. Thank you. Christian, 1 minute, please.
Okay, thank you, Jim, for this opportunity. I think I would just say that knowledge is not power. It is applied knowledge that gives power. It is the implementation that gives power. We have spent about 3 hours engaging and discussing. It is good, but what are we going to do after this? Are we going to take these ideas and implement it within our organization to create change, or we're just going to sit around and continue our daily routine? So I just want to encourage all of those who have spent time investing in this Knowledge Cafe to implement it. It is in the implementation that there is change. Knowledge alone does not give power. And once again, I thank WACSI for facilitating such knowledge sharing events, and I wish that we are going to have more, and I look forward to the next Knowledge Cafe. Thank you.
I look forward as well. And I'm sure, colleagues, we are filling the post-evaluation survey. Please, we need your feedback. Yes, Daniel, I can see your hand up. Just to reiterate, knowledge is not power. It is applied knowledge that is power. That is a strong call. And I think as organizations, we should endeavor to apply what we've gathered here. We all share tips to ourselves. So applying these tips will make us stronger, bigger, and better for a prosperous West Africa. Daniel, on behalf of the participants, what do you have to say? Thank you, Daniel. 1 minute, sir. Daniel Alimu. All right. So thank you all very much, colleagues. We want once again appreciate Dr. Solomon for your contributions, Christian Elonge, Catherine Adakwa for your contributions. We will definitely have to acknowledge, WACSI staff who are in the back room doing great work to ensure that we have a smooth session. Nancy, Michael, Robert, Fifi, Kwame Asante, Mr. Frank Sombo, Whitney. Thank you also so much, Mabel. You are also wonderful. We also want to acknowledge Samase Soare, one of us. He was an intern with WACSI some years back, and today he's a great contributor to the great work of civil society. Also, Dr. Danlade Abba, just to say, Dr. Danlade Abba and Dr. Solomon were both at WACSI in the Research Fellowship Program in 2017. This is a program for young scholars, who are interested in the work of civil society. So if you are here and you are in the academia and you want to apply the research skills or the academic knowledge to contribute to the body of knowledge that civil society is churning out, do not hesitate to contact us, research@waxi.org, and we will be able to facilitate a wonderful experience for you. Thank you, Dr. Danlade, for always responding to our call. Your contributions have been enormous. To all colleagues, can we just turn on our videos? We usually don't like using video because of bandwidth issues, but let us just turn on our videos. And Michael, you will help us to take a picture. Please, Abdul, we are not saying bye-bye yet. Just a minute, let's take this picture. We want a wonderful picture and we should smile like me, Yes, great. Chima Megwi, we have colleagues from Kenya, from the Middle East, from Southern Africa, from Nigeria, from Liberia, from Sierra Leone. We acknowledge your presence. You all are wonderful, and it's thanks to you that we are having this successful session. Henry Niplo, we can't see your image yet. Sware Sidiki, your video, please. Robert Opong, your video, Mabel. Kwabena Krojua, please.
Also, video, your voice is not coming.
I know. So, Michael, can you guide us on this, please? Can you take a screenshot? We can do cheese,
Yeah, so by the count of 3. Okay, so say cheese. 1, 2, 3.
Cheese.
Okay,
cheese.
So I need to take the next screen again. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
Great, great, great. So thank you all, colleagues. We appreciate your time. Based on the information you've provided in the post-session survey, we are going to use that to know which session to organize next and when to organize that. Until then, from the board and management and the team at WACSI, and of course, you are invaluable constituents, we want to say we appreciate the contribution that you are bringing to the civil society sector. We will continue to serve you to the best of our ability. And until the next session, we would like to say bye-bye for now. Thank you very much. And
bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Mm.